Today's webinar is going to explore some of the many dimensions of leadership and how these experience, both in sport and beyond sport, shape the way that we lead. Leadership isn't just about titles and positions, but it's about continually learning and growing and backing yourself and creating opportunities for others to thrive. I'm really excited to introduce you to Liz Jack today, whose leadership journey has spanned across Olympic competition. She was an Olympic diver for Australia, national coaching, executive leadership. She was the CEO with TIS previously as well. So she's got decades of experience both within sport and outside the sector as well. So Liz will be sharing how her leadership's evolved through challenges, reinvention, some exceptional resilience. I'm very excited for you to hear her story. I first saw Liz speak on International Women's Day earlier this year and can't wait for you to hear her incredible stories. So please join me in welcoming Liz today, and over to you.
Thanks, Philippa. And for those of you that joined late, I'd encourage you to turn your cameras on. I see a few familiar names, so they will be familiar faces. I won't say anything bad about the TIS since some of the TIS staff are here. And how fantastic have the Commonwealth Games been? I could talk about that instead of leadership, but we've seen lots of amazing performances and stories from that. Thinking about this topic and distilling down what I wanted to say about leadership in, 30, 40 minutes was fairly challenging. There are just so many aspects to leadership that I could have covered, and also the fact that it comes in so many different shapes and sizes. This will not be the be-all and end-all, and I thought what I would do is simply talk about a couple of the experiences I had and the observations that I made over the course of my sporting career that have shaped my overall approach to leadership. As Philippa said, I went from being an athlete to a national coach, albeit the Canadian national coach for 10 years, and then worked as a sports administrator, both running the Tasmanian Institute of Sport and also what was then called Sport and Recreation Tasmania, now Active Tasmania. It was really those roles that gave me the skills and the experience that I needed to move into other sectors in senior roles as either a CEO or a deputy secretary in the state government. I ended up working in well outside of sport in things like education, community development, culture and the arts, libraries and archives, infrastructure, economic development, and even child safety. So I don't think I could have done that if I didn't have the experiences I did in sport. But working in those sectors was amazing. It opened my eyes to the different challenges that they face in those sectors, as well as the similarities to what we deal with in sport. It opened other doors and opportunities for me, and it also challenged me immensely. Walking into something like running a statewide library network and the archive network, I knew nothing about. So I had to learn from scratch, same as infrastructure, same as culture and the arts, which included TMAG, Arts Tasmania and Screen Tasmania. But I really think that it was those experiences that gave me the capacity to contribute in my current role, which is as a commissioner of the Australian Sports Commission. Sure, I could have come in with just simply wearing a sport hat, but there are so many aspects of what I've done from a leadership perspective that transfer straight into the sports sector that I've found that really useful. So I guess that's one of my first messages is don't just paint yourself into a box. Don't just think you can do one thing. And it might not be that you ever want to move out of sport. I sure didn't originally. But there are things out there that you can bring the skills that you already have, or there are experiences out there that you can take advantage of that will build your own toolkit. You need to be able to say yes to opportunities, as scary as they are, and be prepared to push yourself outside your comfort zone, no matter what it is, within sport or out. You just don't know where it will take you. And I guess it's a similar message that Christine Finnegan gave. I had the pleasure of hearing her talk, and I was really, that spoke to me. And as I said, it wasn't something that I jumped at. I was never going to move out of sport. I learned to dive when I was 7 years old. I continued diving until I was probably 20. I competed for Australia in the 1976 Olympic Games. I went into coaching in 1980 and coached the Canadian national team until 1990. And all through that time, sport was it. And I was never going to move out of coaching, because those of you who do coach and work with athletes, you know how it's all encompassing. It becomes your life, or it certainly did from my perspective. But after the 1984 Olympic Games, where I coached 4 athletes, one was Julie Kent, a Tasmanian diver, but the other 3 were Canadians. 2 were the youngest ever Canadians to ever make a finals at the Olympic Games at that time, and 1 won the gold medal in the women's 3-metre springboard. I'm going to speak about her a little bit later, but that was the pinnacle of my sporting career, I suppose, but I was going to continue forever as a coach. And I'll never forget, in 1986, sitting in the stands at the national championships in Calgary, and I was chatting away to a guy by the name of Harold Cliff, who was a consultant with Sport Canada, which is the same as the Sports Commission. And he said to me, what are you going to do with the rest of your life, with the rest of your career? And I said, well, I'm going to coach. And he said, oh, you've got so much more to offer than coaching. You need to think about that. You've got leadership skills, you've got management skills, you've got all these other skills and experience. You could do much more. You could come and work at Sport Canada. You would be a great asset. You could get into sports administration. And I just thought, go away. I'm just not interested in that. So I shrugged it off. I thanked him very much for the advice, but thanks, but no thanks. And continued on coaching. But that little worm got in my ear, and I kept thinking about, well, maybe there is more to this. Maybe I can offer athletes more, and maybe I can offer athletes and coaches and others more. Maybe there are opportunities out there. And about the same time, I just decided, after living in Canada for 15 years, I really wanted to get back to Tassie. And I was thinking, I'm going to have to go back and probably just Pete Culhane, help athletes in the gym with their weight training, or write programs for athletes doing something. Because who's going to want a diving coach? At about the same time, the position of director of the Tasmanian Institute of Sport came up, and my mum sent me the ad. And long story short, I ended up in that role. And I have to thank Harold for that, because if he hadn't have put that thought in my head, I don't believe I would ever have put my hand up for that job, because I didn't think I had all the skills. I'd been a coach. Yes, I'd managed teams. Yes, I ran the largest diving club in the country, and I was a paid professional coach full-time. But I still didn't think I had those skills. So it was him that first started me on this journey of exploration of what I actually could do, and what I could achieve, and how I could challenge myself. That was probably a good lesson. One of my worst lessons and most impactful lessons was one that came at probably the most important time of my sporting career. And I will say it wasn't a fun lesson to learn. And that was at the 1976 Olympic Games. I made the team at the age of 16, youngest diver to make the team at that time. I competed in both events, because in those days you didn't specialise, you had to do everything. So I was a springboard diver and also a platform diver. Competed in the springboard, which was not my best event. Platform was my best event. And at 16, I wasn't expecting to win a medal, but I could have made the finals. My coach was the Canadian national coach, because I went to Canada in 1975 for 10 months to train in the lead up to the trials for the Olympic Games, because living in Launceston at the time, with a pool that was outdoor and closed 6 months of the year and no platform, it was very difficult to do much training. And I'd been invited to Canada to train. Got to the Olympic Games, to the platform event, and divers have a choice as to which dives they do when. And in that event, at the time, that we had to do 8 dives, and I had left my very best dive to last. That dive happened to be one of the hardest dives that any woman was doing at the time, and I was the only one in the event doing the dive. I could have done it in my sleep with my eyes closed. It was a back 1.5 somersault, but it incorporated 2.5 rotations twists. So back 1.5, 2.5 is what we called it. I knew in those days, we always went to our coach before our dive. It's the most ridiculous thing now when I think back, but you'd go to your coach and he'd say, don't forget, get your arms through early, get your legs up, whatever it was. And that would be the last thing you'd be thinking about going up to the 10-metre tower. I'd done the dive countless times. I knew what I had to do, but that was just the way it worked. Went over to my coach to get those last words of advice, and he wasn't there. And I'd been diving really well up until that point. I couldn't find him. So I scouted around. They kept the athletes in a room. You had to stay off the pool deck, and I went around the room. Just was not there to be found. And I was thinking, oh my God, I'm going to have to go. I'm going to have to go. And I was starting to panic and thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I finally decided, no, I'm just going to have to go. So I headed to the 10-metre tower. And as I'm climbing up the stairs, every step I'm thinking, bloody hell, that's not, where is he? And I was getting madder and madder because he wasn't there for my last dive, most important dive of the day for me. Got up to the 10-metre, and instead of thinking about the technical things that I needed to think about, get my arms through early, get my feet up, keep my abs tight, I was just thinking that I had to prove to him I didn't need him. I took off, and the minute I took off, I knew I hadn't got my arms through early enough, and my legs hadn't come up the way they needed to, and I was in a lot of trouble because if you don't have that, you don't have rotation, and you're not going to make the dive. So I actually landed very short, i.e. flat on the water. I think I probably scored 2s and 3s. I don't even remember. It was a disaster, and because of it, I missed the finals. I was actually in the finals. All I had to do was just a normal dive, and I would have made the finals. It was gut-wrenching, and it still is gut-wrenching to this day. But I learned the biggest lesson I've ever learned, and that is, and I have to say that my coach wasn't there because he knew I was teetering on the finals, like it was within points, and he was over, in those days it was not as strict, and he was over looking over the shoulders of the recorders who were all doing things by hand in those days, and to see what my points were and to see what I needed to get into the finals. And got caught up, and they wouldn't let him back to the room in time to give me those words of advice that I didn't need. He felt bad, I felt bad, and it took us years to talk about this. But as I said, I learned the biggest lesson of my life. Number one, don't rely on someone else. Make sure you take responsibility for your own actions. Don't blame others if you make the mistake. And make sure, and this is the biggest one for me, as a coach, I wanted to then make sure that I gave my own athletes the tools and the confidence they needed to stand on their own 2 feet. So once I started coaching, there was no way I always had my divers coming to me before their dive. As a matter of fact, there were days where I'd say, okay, this event, I'm going to go sit in stands. You're on your own. You know what you have to do. If you want me, just wave. So I took a very different approach, and it made me a better coach, and I managed to coach someone to an Olympic gold medal, but it wasn't an easy lesson. And I guess that's the message. Be responsible for your own actions and make sure the team around you builds the skills that they need. And you can use that it doesn't matter if it's coaching or more generally in leadership. I also have to say that there are 3 or maybe 4 people along the way who stood out for me in terms of other lessons that I've learned. I didn't realise at the time that they were lessons, and I've since thanked them. But I'm just going to quickly run through those. So the first story is about a guy by the name of Herb Llewellyn. He lived for the sport. His kids were divers. He was a diving coach, and he was a literal genius. I can't remember what his IQ was, but it was through the ceiling. He did things, just to give you an idea. He he worked for a company called Domtar in Canada, which made paper. He invented a waterless paper making machine. You need gallons and gallons and gallons of water to make paper normally. He made this prototype. It cost so much that the company said we can't do it. He invented a retractable diving board that when a diver, when they went up to do their hurdle to land on the end of the board, if they were learning a new dive, you could pull it back so that they didn't hit themselves on the diving board. Problem was he started by attaching a diving board on wheels to the back of his car and getting his kids on the board to try and do their hurdles, and ended up landing on the road a few times, so it didn't really go well. He invented a catapult that threw divers certain distance in the air and a certain distance from the catapult, and had them supposedly coming back down, landing in a foam pit, because he felt that if you could get them up in the air for longer and they were doing more rotations and more somersaults and they could learn how to land, they'd be much better if they were then on a diving board. He actually got the executives from Domtar to come out and have a look at it because he wanted some funding to back him on it. And it was the middle of the winter. It was in the car park. There was snow everywhere. He got it all set up, and the Domtar exec said, "Have you actually tested this without it?" Oh, and he had his son in the catapult that he was going to fire off. They said, "Herb, have you tested this on anything else before?" He said, no, we'll be right. He said, "I've done all the calculations, whatever. Got his son David to get in the catapult, and they said, "No, sorry, a bit of risk management here. Let's test it with a sandbag first." So they got a bag roughly the same weight as his son, and they put it in the catapult. They had to come back and do it a day later. Put it in the catapult. They shot it off. It went twice as high as he'd anticipated, certainly further than he anticipated, and it actually splattered all over the car park. So that was a failure. But he never stopped. He put a hole. He sawed a hole in the middle of his own ceiling, and with it brought his trampoline inside, because in Canada you can't trampoline outside in the winter. And he had his kids jumping on a trampoline with a hole in the ceiling so they could actually train. He did all these things, and after every failure, he just went back. He was never daunted. He just came back and he did something again and again and again, until finally he invented the bubble machine. And for those of you that don't know diving and don't know what a bubble machine is, it revolutionized diving at the time. A bubble machine actually forces compressed air up from the bottom of the pool, and it breaks the surface of the water in such a way that it looks like frothy beer. So if a diver lands flat when they're learning a dive, they don't get hurt as much. And I will tell you, it still hurts. You still cop a fair whack, but you don't get the bruising, and you can go back and you do it again and again. Whereas if you hit hard water flat, that's it for the rest of the day. And, bruising, I've had my legs bleeding from landing too many times flat. So it really did make a difference. He was revered by divers around the world because of that invention, and he finally made his name for it with this bubble machine. And I guess for me, that lesson is never, ever give up. Just because you fail the first time, it doesn't mean that you can't achieve. He had so much resilience. He didn't worry about what people think. He believed in himself and his ideas. So I think that's another lesson. Commit to what you believe in, and you need to back yourself. Don't wait for others to do it for you. They'll jump on board, and they will. If you're really committed and you can back yourself, others will also back you. I also strongly believe that if you're struggling to believe in yourself, fake it till you make it. You don't always have to believe in yourself. A little bit of fake confidence goes a long way, which leads me to, I'll now give you the story that taught me that lesson. I had two divers, one by the name of Anne, one by the name of Tamara. Both lacked confidence. Both were talented. Both were probably, 10, 12, 13. I can't remember at the time that it happened, but You know, they'd go into events and you could see that they were worried about themselves, that they looked scared when they got up on the diving board. So I had a conversation with both of them separately, but basically told them the same thing. The judges will take into account your level of confidence when you get up on that board. So even if it's just to look to them that you're confident, just change your posture. Just walk around with your hands on your hips, cross your arms in front of you. Don't stand there looking like you're shivering and cold and scared. Look people in the eyes. Stand there with your head up and actually approach your dive as though you really mean it. I tried drumming this into both of them over the course of I don't know how many weeks. And took it on board, lapped it up, and people thought she was actually overconfident by the end. But I will say that it made a difference to her diving. It made a difference to her results. Tamara, on the other hand, just couldn't do it. She would say to me, I can't, I feel sick, I'm going to throw up. It's not, and I'd say, well, if you throw up, that's fine, we'll take you off the board. But if you don't throw up, you're going to do the dive anyway, so you might as well look like you have the confidence. She couldn't do it. It just wasn't for her. And at the end of the day, I mean, she won a few national championships, but decided that she couldn't go on because she just didn't believe in herself. And on the other hand, went on to win a bronze and a silver medal at the Olympic Games. Now, it wasn't just all about the confidence. She had amazing talent. She worked her butt off. But I do believe that there was a component of what she did that actually helped. So, as I said, fake it till you make it. I really believe that the strength of your mind can make a huge difference to what you do and how you do it and how people perceive you. And I guess that's my final lesson, which is my story about Sylvie Balnier, who was the gold medalist at the LA Olympic Games. Sylvie was the most focused and planned individual I have to this day ever met. It blows me away to think back that long ago. So we're talking back, say, around 1980, 81. She had, even before then, a personal and very private goal to win gold at Olympic Games. Now, diving at the time had only ever had one medal, and that was in 1956, and it was a bronze. So, you know, the Canadians weren't considered a threat, and they weren't considered to be medal prospects at the Games. However, that was what Sylvie had decided that she was going to do, and that's what she worked for. Now, I did not coach Sylvie. She was coached by a guy by the name of Donald Dion. Sylvie is French Canadian, so is Donald. But 3 years out from the Games, in 1981, she decided to make it public that was what she had intended to do. It just so happens that at that time, Sylvie and I had travelled to the Pan American Games in Venezuela. And Donald, her coach, wasn't up there, and I was asked to coach Sylvie. We got on really well. We clicked, and I quickly understood what Sylvie needed to help her in terms of her preparation for a competition and also through the event. She won the event that she competed in, and we then travelled to a couple of other international events where I happened to coach Sylvie, and she did extremely well. So with this public goal of winning an Olympic gold medal, she decided that she needed to build the right team around her. She came to me in 1981, towards the end of 1981, and said, I need you as my coach at the Olympic Games in 1984. I want you to be my coach at every event I compete at up until then. And I said, Sylvia, you need to speak to Donald about that. Donald is your coach. You know, you have to have that conversation. She said, I have. Donald is very happy. He'll coach me at home. He'll do the technical work. You need to coach me on the pool deck. This in 1984, this was unheard of. You know, you didn't have two separate coaches in diving. You had the one coach and they stuck with you. Most coaches would have been too protective and too maybe lack the confidence, I don't know, to give another coach an opportunity. But Donald and I worked together with Sylvie and the rest of her team. She identified who she needed, whether it was, you know, strength coaches or psychologists or whatever. And she then planned every single step of the way and basically worked with us as her coaches to determine how she was going to win that gold medal. We planned so much that she competed at another event in LA 10 months out from the games, where we knew that the podium, it was a test event for the games. So the podium was the same. The judges were sitting in the same places. They had the stands set up the same. Everything was as close to what it would be like at the LA Olympics as we could make it. She also visualized everything. She visualized not just every dive that she did. She visualized every moment of the competition, from the march on of the athletes to every single dive, to her getting the judges' scores, the crowd's reaction. She visualized her final dive, the roar of the crowd, walking up to the podium, getting the medal, everything. And she visualized that every day in the lead up to those games. Once we got to the games, she asked me whether I would room with her. She didn't want anyone else to room with her. So again, not normally what you'd have, but she and I had a room together, and I arranged for us to have a room where we could oversee the pool, and we would train when the pool was empty. Most of the time you'd say to your athletes, right, we're going to train at 8 a.m. because that's the time the event's on, or we're going to train at 12, or we're going to train at 4. Sylvie was different. We trained when she could just go in and do her dives without having to wait around. I coached from where I would be standing in the event. I wore what I would be wearing in the event. And one funny story was that at the LA Games, Vidal Sassoon had a salon there, and athletes and coaches could go in and have their hair cut or dyed or done whatever for nothing. And I was going to go and do it. And she said to me, please don't till after my event. I don't want you looking different for my event. So it was every single detail. We had every risk covered. We ensured that I had an extra pair of her lucky bathers in case the first pair wasn't there. We did everything we could. We planned it down to the nth degree. And I mean, in terms of project management, she was a star. But it was also that visualization that was astonishing. As a matter of fact, Sylvie contacted me 3 days ago and sent me an email and said, I need a photo of you and me together. I can't find the best one. I'm doing a talk on visualization and I want to talk about the things that we did. So it's something that has stuck with her. We got to the event. Sylvie was not the best diver there. I will be perfectly honest. It was very close. After the preliminaries, she was in second place. So then we had to come back for the finals and do it all again. I knew it was going to be incredibly close. Going into her last dive, it was neck and neck, and you couldn't have split it. And she came over to me and she said, how am I doing? Where do I sit? And I said, Sylvie, you're absolutely fine. Just go to your dive the way you do it every other day of the week. And that was all I said. Didn't give her any words of advice other than that. Sylvie went up. She did her dive as well as she always did. By the way, she was second going into that dive, but I didn't let her know. She won the event by 3.36 points, which is nothing. For me, what set Sylvie apart wasn't the fact that she was the best diver on the day. It was the fact that she was the best prepared and she was the most sure of herself. So for me, if you have a dream, that lesson is, if you have a dream, don't just write it down. Talk about it. Set yourself up to achieve it. Build the right team around you and sell the vision and involve everybody in it. And even if it's a small thing, If you want to do something to achieve it, tell someone. Because I tell you what, it's a lot harder once you've told someone that you're going to do something to sit back and go, oh, no, that's all too hard. I know because I've tried it. You have to see and feel yourself in all your successes. Because for me, that either means the difference between you're there or you're almost there. And if you fail, what's the big deal? I go back to the herb story. It's a lesson. It's a lesson that you learn that takes you to the next challenge that you have to face. I'm looking at a clock behind my computer screen and I know I'm getting close to time. So just to wrap up, my messages are say yes to the opportunities that arise, no matter how scary they are, because they will, you'll learn something from them. Believe in yourself and be prepared to put yourself out there, no matter how weird that feels. If you don't have the confidence, pretend that you do. I had a woman just come up to me the other day and say, she used to work for me at Sport and Rec, and she was looking for new roles, and she was saying how she finds it really hard at meetings because she always feels that people know more than her. And I said to her at the time, I said, when you go to a meeting, I said, you don't have to talk all the time. Just tell yourself that you have to make 1 point at each meeting you go to, just 1 point. And I said, if you make that 1 point, sooner or later, it'll be easier to make 2 points, and then 3, and then however many you need to. She actually, this was years ago, this is probably about 6 years ago. She's now quite successful in the not-for-profit sector. And we bumped into each other at an event. She said, I have to thank you. She said, that advice you gave me was brilliant. She said, I found it so scary, but I did it, and it became easier and easier. So those little things work. See yourself in the role you want, doing the things that you aspire to. If you can't picture yourself there, I'm not sure how you get there. And vocalize those dreams and goals. As I said before, it's harder to go back on them once you've stated it publicly or even just to a couple of trusted people. I mean, the first time I stepped into a role that was outside my comfort zone, I'd already been saying, I could do more than sport. I don't have to wear a sport hat. I've got skills and experience. I could do this. And so when my then boss or manager left, he was a Dep Sec, I actually thought to myself, oh shit, I've been saying all this. I can't not apply for this job now because otherwise I'm going back on what I've said. And take responsibility for your actions. Don't blame other people. Use it as a learning experience. There's no greater gift, as silly as it sounds, than making a mistake. And as Christine has said, also getting and listening to feedback, especially when it's tough feedback. Those lessons and that tough feedback can actually really help in building your own resilience and your own skills and experience. And give other people the tools, the people around you, your team, give them the tools they need to grow, to develop, and to excel. You don't make them dependent on you. Let their skills flourish. It's so much better if you've got people around you with skills that you don't. You know, great leaders don't bring a team together with all the same skills. They make sure that they've got people that have skills that they don't. And they give them credit when it's due and stand in front of their team when it's time to cop flack and cop the blame if it's dished out. You know, I'm really lucky in the senior roles I've held. I haven't always been the one to recruit, but whether I've recruited or not, I haven't needed to be the expert because the people around me have been the experts, have had the expertise that's needed. And really, I feel like all I've done is wave the flag, understood what the challenges were or what the opportunities were, and then stood on a platform and put them forward. I've also been able to play devil's advocate and also ask the hard questions because that's another part of being a leader. And my final point is be kind to yourself, because if you can't be, how's anybody else going to be? It's not always about perfection. It's not always about working yourself to the bone, stepping outside your own boundaries because someone else wants you to. Do what's right for you and be kind to yourself. I'll wrap up there and open up or questions, Philippa? Is that?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Liz. That was amazing. The first question we have in here is, how difficult was it to move from Launceston at such a young age in chasing your goals?
I thought it was going to be from Launceston, full stop. It's funny. It wasn't difficult for me at all because I think I was probably pretty naive, but I didn't really think too hard about what it was going to be like to move overseas to a place where I didn't really know anyone except the coach. But I hadn't really, I didn't have a goal to make the Olympic Games at that time, but I did want to excel and I did want to do the best I could in my sport. And I knew I wasn't going to do it from Tassie. So I just figured, well, it could be Melbourne, could be Sydney, but why not Montreal? It's exciting. I have to say that as a 16-year-old, I also did it once the games were in my sight, think, I'm here in Montreal training and now I'm going to go to the Olympic Games in Montreal. Why couldn't it be an exciting country that I had not visited? But it wasn't that difficult. And my parents were incredibly supportive. I had so much support from so many people. But the one thing my mother said that sticks with me to this day is when I was leaving, she said, once we made the decision, she said, you know, you're going for 10 months. She said, you have to commit to 10 months. Don't think you can go for 10 months and then come back after 3 months and say it's all too hard. You better make sure you know what you want to do. So, of course, I said, yep, I'll stick it out for 10 months. By the time 15 years rolled around, I went back. I think my mother was saying, come home now, we want you back.
Great, thank you. Another nice comment here. I'm sure it was awkward not seeing everyone's faces and seeing how well this was received in real time, but I was reflecting that a motivational experience as good as this one would cost hundreds of dollars in certain contexts. So really, really appreciate it, and so many lessons that are transferable in all areas of life.
Oh, thank you for that.
And Scott, same thing. What an incredible presentation. Thank you. How do you know when it's time to look for other opportunities?
That's a really good question. I think, okay, I will be honest. Sometimes I think you do know because, well, for me, I did at times know, because if you're doing the same old, and you're not getting the same, for me, it's more than enjoyment, you're not feeling challenged, then maybe question whether that's what you should be doing. It's very easy to sit in your comfort zone and keep doing the same. And I'm looking at Pete Colhane's face here, but I will never forget on a trip from Hobart to Launceston once when I was the director of the TIS, I was driving back from an event in Hobart with Paul Austin, who ended up then stepping into the role of TIS director after I left. And I said to him, you know, I can't keep doing, I'd been at the TIS for a long time, I think it was 14 years, but I said, I can't keep doing this. I said, unless we actually do something to really turn everything on its head to suit the fact that I'm not being challenged, I think I need to look for something that's more challenging for me. I also said, if I'm not feeling challenged, I don't know that I'm going to continue, I'm the right person to take the institute to the next level. So that was one that I definitely remember thinking that. Now, I didn't do anything about it. I vocalised that. I didn't do anything about it. I was then asked to take on the role as interim role as Director of Sport and Recreation Tasmania for a 6-month period. And so I said, I can't do it for 6 months. I'm a single parent with 2 young kids. I'll do it for 12 months, but not 6. And so I took that on and then went from there. But that was one that I knew. I think other times I have been offered opportunities, and if they interest me in even the slightest, I always explore them and I will put my hand up. It was the position of commissioner with the Australian Sports Commission. I thought there'd be so many more people that would be better qualified than me to take on that role, but I decided, well, what can I lose by putting my hand up? If they don't want me, they don't want me. I'll move on to something else. So I think it's a matter of just, if it speaks to you in any way, give it a go. But if you feel that you're very comfortable and you're just doing the same thing over and over, you're probably not in the right place. I don't know if that's answered the question. And if there aren't a lot of questions, I'm happy for people to actually speak rather than type. It's a lot easier and quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to take yourself off mute if you have any questions. We're
Well,
getting close to the end.
I'll say
Yeah,
mine. I just typed it, but I'll say mine then. It's not a question, but really a comment. Liz, I just wanted to really thank you for sharing your story about your Olympic experience in the final. And it's interesting when I was listening to it today, and it's the same as when I heard it the other time. It actually makes me quite teary because it makes me think of, I almost put myself in your shoes, and I can't imagine. I cannot imagine how that felt. But yeah, thank you for sharing it, because I'm sure it took a really long time to be able to do that.
It was gut-wrenching. And the worst part is when I did finally have the conversation with my coach, he was as gutted as me. He felt really guilty and really bad. I felt let down.
Yeah.
But over the years, I realized that I'd let myself down, that he hadn't. But he didn't want to talk about it because he just felt so guilty. And it was really good to be able to have that discussion. But I could have walked away from that and hated diving or given up or just said, it's not worth it, I can't go through this. I mean, we all have our highs and lows. Nobody died.
Yeah.
No, it's not, when you're focused on the moment as an athlete, it does mean a lot. But you need to also keep things in perspective. So, and I learned the greatest lesson I could for me as a coach, so that I didn't have my own athletes reliant on me. I was there for them when they needed it, but I didn't have to be there all and everything.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is you have to remember, and I know millions of people have said this to you, you were in the Olympics. You were diving. You were doing really well in an Olympics. That's amazing.
I know. And look, I think it's the elite athlete mindset. My daughters get really angry with me because I say, yeah, but I didn't even make finals. And they go, Mum, how many people go to the Olympic Games? Stop saying that. But, you know, those of you guys that work at the elite levels of sport, I'm sure you get it. You can always do better. And sometimes there's nothing wrong with trying to achieve more or not being happy. But yes, I have to accept that, yes, I went to Olympic Games. I shouldn't be too disappointed with that.
Yeah.
Thanks for the reminder, Jo.
That's okay. But also, not just that, then you used your experience and knowledge to help other people succeed in their goals. That's a massive thing. It really is.
Oh, it did make me a better coach. That's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
This is incredible. Thank you so much, Liz. Just being mindful of time as we wrap up on everyone's lunch break today. But yeah, this was absolutely incredible. So please give Liz some love in the comments there for sharing her insights and experience and expertise with us today. We've all taken away something. I always encourage people to take that one thing and make sure you implement it today. There's so many nuggets, but we just need to focus on that one.
And thanks everyone for joining.
Absolutely. It's so great to have you all here. Next week, we'll be having Hannah Richardson from the Pelvic Studio joining us to share on pelvic health and high impact sports. So prevention, performance and practical support. So we'll be looking at often overlooked subject of pelvic floor dysfunction in women's sport, particularly high impact environments. So this will be another must listen episode.